Techlandia is recorded at the Central Office on the East Side in Portland. Central Office is a one stop for all your office or meeting needs. Check them out at centraloffice.com.
Welcome to the latest episode of Techlandia, Tao's regular podcast series. I'm Skip Newberry, President and CEO of Tao. And with us, we're pleased to have Jay with Vedex. Jay, welcome.
Thanks, Skip. I'm super excited to be here, especially considering my long-term vision involves a technology learning center named after this podcast.
Fantastic. We'll get there soon enough. But first, everyone who's ever listened to one of these episodes always knows I start with the same question, which is, how did you get started professionally? I was wondering if you could take a few minutes just to kind of walk us through your own journey.
Sure, love to. I was born, bred, raised, and educated all in Oregon, and I wanted to make sure my company also stayed in Oregon. I love this state, and I got started. I have kind of a winding road of career that I wish somebody when I was 8 years old had said, "Jay, you love video games, you love puzzles. There's a job for you out there." But instead, it was like, "Hey, be a doctor, be a lawyer. Look at these high-paying jobs. Go after this. Be a scientist." So I went on my career journey in a roundabout way. But when I touched base with some of my early values, looking back now, I can see exactly why I love it today. It's the same thing I loved at 8 years old. It was puzzling, and it was video games, and it was learning, and it was this combination of figuring things out with new technology. I absolutely adore it. In terms of like how Vedex came about, I was working for a private public company in the world. I traveled to 52 markets, recruiting international students, both to the United States and to the UK, into engineering and business university programs. And one of the struggles they had was speaking when they arrived at campus. They could pass their English exams, but they couldn't have a really good debate in in a university class, because they were timid. They hadn't practiced a lot of debate stuff. They had practiced for tests, which I'll get to later on. But I was enthralled when I saw what VR could do in 2015. We remember the hump in 2015 where, oh, you put these little cardboard things on, put your phone on it. It was great. Or you could go into a big computer room and wire into a computer and see all the virtual reality, that's been developed over the last 25 years. But the problem I saw with these kids, we started to research a little bit about what if we put these folks in a practice situation in VR to practice speaking with an avatar. And then they could make all the mistakes they could and not feel judged by a live person looking at them with that eyebrow kind of going up. And so it worked. And the first couple pilots, the students had 50% more confidence in speaking. They had better comprehension because they weren't embarrassed and nervous to listen to the avatar. And I was like, this is it. And so 5 of us from that company started Vedex. And that's kind of like how I first got started. But then I hit all the barriers that VR system integration exist. And then the founders and I went, well, if we want to get to kids actually using this in school the way we want them to, we're going to have to address these other problems first. And that is, scalable deployment, data privacy, support for the tech directors, professional development for the teachers, and really just being a system integrator for enterprise and schools. And so that's where we are right now today.
And in terms of some of the customers that Vedex serves, what does that look like?
Oh man, we started just focusing on education, and that just grew as customers came in. And the same process we were using for system integration in schools was actually easier in the enterprise and corporate, because in schools you got to go through vendor registration, state, all of this other stuff, and in the corporate enterprise we could really just address some of the challenges. So to answer your question, we are working with job training centers in the United States. We're working with universities and research departments. We are invested in a couple of applications being developed on different campuses. We are working with a lot of grades 7 through 12 to build virtual reality labs in their schools for career exploration, for learning history. Can you imagine sitting on the wall of the Alamo, and watching a battle take place and then listening to both sides? Way better than a history book chapter as a learning tool. So, and we're working with corporations for safety simulations, getting their safety simulations out to their workforce, and also inside of C-suites for management, soft skills, conversations, which can be very difficult. And we'll go back to my original part, very difficult to have unless you actually have them over and over. And you can do that with virtual reality soft skills, and especially with the introduction of AI into XR.
Interesting. So on the latter point, then it's almost like you're using it for role playing, right? And
Hmm.
and helping people to improve their human skills, coincidentally, by using technology.
Yes, that's exactly it. AI has allowed dynamic learning to take place. So you can put in data sets to have your counterpart either be very mean, very nice, very accommodating, or, you know, one of the four geniuses. They could be an idea explorer, or they could be a discernment person you have to deal with on your team, which a lot of people don't know how to deal with. They just think they're negative Nellies, but it's actually because they're being brought into the deal at the wrong time of the deal.
Do you find you just use a sales example? Do you find that sales teams are kind of the earliest adopters in terms of certain functions within companies?
Actually, the early adopters for this technology and training, it has to do with safety,
Mhm.
uh, because you until you have to perform something with a timer and loud noises and it all taking place, it's way different than doing the procedure with somebody saying, "Oh, go ahead and turn that to the right," and it's all calm. People either freeze or act, and VR gets all those people that might have frozen to actually act in a safety situation. So those are really that and healthcare, the early adopters of this simulation technology.
And in terms of use in schools, you know, I was wondering if you could describe a little bit about some of the different types of, examples of how it's being used in the classroom. Like for which subjects is it
Mhm.
getting kind of the best results?
Yeah, so one of our partners, Victory XR, has done an entire civil rights museum, and that's being used a lot. You can go back and look at the artifacts. You can take a journey on the Amistad, and it's grueling. It's grueling how we used to treat humans in this trade back in during slave trade. And I am a history buff, and I was not impacted emotionally until I did that simulation in VR, and you get that empathy feeling. And so, answering the question, it's being used in history to look back on history examples for sure. That's a big use case. It's being used by teachers to take kids around the world that may not travel there. Go sit on the Great Wall of China. Go on an archaeological dig in South America, and really get a global field trip out of the scenario. There's like 40 some global field trips out there. And then as of recently, that's being used to build lessons for each other. So the best way to learn is to teach. And so the platform allows students to create their own project and share it with their friends. So their friends are learning from them, they're learning from the project, and the teacher gets to observe and give feedback and get some joy out of watching this learning take place. So, kind of facilitator platforms using AI.
That's really cool. I remember I saw a I think it was a TED talk a while back. This was
Mhm.
pre-pandemic, and the gist of it was the person was talking about virtual reality and how he saw it as kind of the perfect empathy machine,
Mhm.
by enabling people to see things and hear things as though they're in the moment in a totally different part of the world with totally different people. And it evokes a number of different sort of reactions and emotions that you wouldn't be able to get, to your point, as readily through, say, reading it or even watching it in sort of like on a screen on a wall, right? So it's,
Yeah.
um,
Mhm.
I'm wondering, are there opportunities thinking about the nature of decision making, especially at the corporate level, whether it's with exec teams or boards of directors? Do you see a lot of applications being used along those lines where it's, the notion of leading with empathy is
Yeah.
something that's a newer sort of concept when it comes to executives? And I'm wondering, what are some of the things you're seeing there trend wise?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you two of the practical examples being used in some companies, some of our companies. One is with our partner Body Swaps, which if you've got into a meeting and you've got 5 execs and they meet every week in a standing meeting, 3 of them probably dominate the conversation, and not intentionally, maybe intentionally, but not intentionally most of the time. And 2 are left out. Their ideas are great, but they're not being really heard, or if they are speaking, they're not being listened to. And this body swap software allows you to see yourself speaking after you're done speaking or answering a question in a simulation, and hear somebody else that's usually soft spoken be left out. And you can really feel what that would be like. So, in your mind, in your practice, in a meeting, like it affected me in Zoom meetings. Wait, Deanna, did you have anything to say about that? I just to open that space for them to speak, and that is such a big deal in these high level meetings. That's one. And then the other example that's being used a lot is our partner virtual speech. Skip, you and I have seen a ton of pitch presentations, from the venture conference and some of the other stuff that we've attended. But this virtual speech allows you to give a pitch over and over again and really refine it. So you're answering, here's the problem, here's how we're solving it, and this is why it's going to continue to grow. Any questions? Like, okay, great. Save me a half hour of my time from that pitch. So, another really good use case.
That's great. Well, shifting a little bit from use cases into the technology itself.
Mhm.
So when we think about, I'm going to play a little devil's advocate. In terms of adoption, do you see VR is more of a nice to have, a need to have? Where are you seeing it kind of cross into? Oh, no, 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 this is essential. This solves, to quote Shashi Jain with the Portland Seed Fund, a migraine level problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And everything has its hype cycle. VR had a big hype cycle in, I think, 08, 15, and 20 because of COVID. And in 2020, VR got a lot of hype that you could solve a lot of things with it, but there's definitely specific use cases you want to use. And I think one of the biggest challenges why that hype died out was there was a lot of barriers, obviously, with the bulky headsets, the isolation after COVID finished, people went back to work, but they no longer want it. It was kind of a technology hangover. And to answer your question of nice to have, need to have, it's been a nice to have,
Uh,
but with AI integration and new hardware coming on the market very, very soon, it's going to be a need to have. And it's going to be a need to have for technicians out in the field. It's going to be a need to have to reduce safety accidents in companies. It's going to be a need to have for medical technicians. I'll tell you a quick example. I was down at Meta headquarters 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, and we watched a presentation from one of the uh, ISVs or application creators also. And he's a doctor, and he's been using VR to train surgeons. And they have most recently used it in a lot of white papers. And they took a nursing student that had been trained on the procedure traditionally. And that was group A. And then they took group B, which had used the traditional education, but then the simulation, instead of on mannequins and such, was done in VR. And during the test of the first time they performed the procedure on their own, they each had the same notes to refer back down to the procedure. And the student that did it traditionally referred to their notes 28 times. The student that had done the simulation training didn't look down except one time. The difference there, you can see across the board on the human investment, on the safety side, on the procedural side, because we use all five senses when we do things. And you need that muscle memory training in addition to traditional training. So as the hardware becomes more accessible, where it's augmented reality, it's mixed reality, and the software is more accurate with subject matter experts in the field helping develop it, we're going to see it everywhere. We're going to see it in the workplace, in education, in healthcare. It truly will. I put my bet on the table. It's going to be everywhere in 5 years.
And someone once said to me, or asked me, what's the greatest fitness app of all time? And I was struggling a bit, and they said it's Pokemon Go, because it essentially enabled people to, you know, get out and move, and it was all gamified, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
just your natural world, but there's a layer of sort of new interest put on
Yeah.
top of it, and it really it put things into perspective around just how transformative truly some of this technology is, and we're experiencing it every day in somewhat more nuanced or modest ways, right?
Uh-huh.
And I think pointing that out, I think underscores the fact that it's not necessarily this far off, technology that has yet to be widely adopted. W- So are you what are you seeing next on the horizon? What's the thing that's most exciting for you?
Well, as a company, it's been exciting to be as the VR hype died down, like a lot of technologies, all the hard work kept taking place behind the scenes, right? The conversion of AI and VR, both on the coding and development side, but also on the learner side, to be able to have real conversations that are dynamic in mixed reality is phenomenal. And so that's very exciting, like on the broader context. Inside of my company, I'm really excited this year. There's some great prospects from helping adult learners get their high school degrees using virtual reality to prisoners getting prepared to be released into society and job training, and a variety of different contracts to help educators understand the technology, what lies behind it, and what lies ahead. And so that leads me to my larger sort of really exciting vision, which is, as the name of this podcast, Techlandia.
Nice. Tell me more.
So I had one person ask me, an investor through multitude of meetings, if you could start Vedex all over again, what would you do different? And I said, well, one of the biggest barriers is educators, facilitators, HR trainers, all of these people that go off to these conferences, keeping up with the technology and understanding what's going to be sustainable investment for their company, school, organization, and which ones are going to fade and they're going to be stuck with a handful of dirt. And we've spent the 5 years selling, which is going out to these large conferences and trying to get them to buy. And so my response to the question, what would I do different? I would build an immersive learning center and bring them to me. And so with that one answer, I put together a fairly large business plan to have a technology center placed in each state. I know it's ambitious, but I'm really excited because it all works. Technology center placed in each state, a Techlandia, and that Techlandia is really the intersection of future-looking technology, not just XR, not just mixed reality and the devices that go with it, but we're talking robotics and AI and the convergence of these technologies into training and workplace space. And so we have a variety of partners, 30 plus right now. There'd be an always on floor exhibition. There is going to be a C-suite office leasing part, so combining kind of a WeWork and a Faraday cafe. So there's privacy for C-suites. And why would they want to be there? Because on the top floor is private event space, but also a place to have professional development conferences for people coming from companies, coming from schools, coming from organizations within that state that need an affordable, high-tech area that they can see the technology in action. And so I left out second floor because that second floor is going to be adaptable. My vision is to have a charter school in that second floor that is focused on problem-based education rather than subject-based education. But in other cases, it might be medical training. In other cases, whatever that state has as a major industry and a training gap that we can use this technology on.
That's really cool. I can't help but think that you should have a conversation with Aaron Graham at OMSI,
Yeah.
Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, because there's OMSI like science museums in just about every state and
Uh-huh.
major city in the
Yeah.
US. And, they often will essentially borrow and steal great ideas from one another
Yeah.
around build outs, programmatic opportunities. And OMSI is going through a 14-acre redevelopment right now, which includes
Wow.
multiple buildings. And it's like sky's the limit in terms of what could be imagined for those buildings.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I'll follow up with you on that one. And
I would absolutely love going back to my childhood. OMSI was an inspiration for me in my gaming and puzzling and all of that. So I would absolutely love to put a Techlandia uh, business model up there in OMSI because the whole building is self-sustainable after
mhm,
the real estate cost.
I love it. I think there's a natural fit there. That's really cool. So I did want to, before we start to wrap up, I wanted to go back to something you raised earlier, which was you mentioned the phrase practice to test, or kind of like learning is done with an eye toward doing well on a test.
Yeah.
And, as a parent, I've definitely seen this with our education system here in the US. How is that problematic? And so what are some of the ways that you're seeing educators utilize technology like mixed reality, VR, AR to, essentially start to break down that old approach?
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things to answer your question, if I go back and look at over all of our use cases, this technology, teachers are looking at it as an add-on rather than a curriculum component. And I think the latter view has to be adopted for the future. And the reason I say that is the way we teach our kids for the test right now, they have to remember information. But with AI being available for that information all the time, we actually got to start re educating or rethinking our education from having these kids graduate to know information to having them graduate to know how to use the information in the real world and use these tools. And when you ask how that could happen, one of the most effective pieces in VR is obviously simulation. So if you take a problem-based learning approach and install it into a school, get rid of the subjects, get rid of history, and I know this is controversial, but I'm going to say anyway. Get rid of history and math, and I'm going subject to subject to subject, and I've got homework in each of those subjects, right? The idea is that when you graduate from 11th grade, 10th grade, you have a certain set of objectives that you had to show competency in. Okay. But how you get to those objectives can be different. Why don't we give them real world problems at each grade level, have them design solutions together using the tools of AI, using all of the variety of educational curriculum that we already have in the schools, putting those things together, and then putting that in a simulation that they built, and then they get to test it. Does the bridge fall down because you didn't know the quadratic equation for it? Right? Does that arch hold up? Did that social idea you came up with cause everybody to fight when it was all done? Well, you don't know until you run the simulation on your proposed solution to the problem that you were given. Right? So it's that problem-based learning where kids are forced to think and forced to use the tools to think. And so when they graduate, they will see the applicability of that knowledge that they just got in grades 6 through 12. And that's kind of the fundamental basis of my charter school idea.
I love it. It's a great idea. You got me converted.
Well, it's going to be a lottery system for the charter school. So you'll have to
I'll get in line.
everybody, lottery system, and it's going to be an exciting place because the professional development conferences for the teachers on the fourth floor will be able to watch all of this taking place as one of their days on the second floor.
Love it. Such a great idea. So wanted to also ask, like, what are you reading right now? What are you listening to? Any particular authors or things you've come across or read recently that you just like really hit you and you're like, I'd love to share this more widely.
Yeah, I think every business person. I just finished this book for the third time. I love reading, and when I say reading, I'm always running around and traveling between meetings, so my reading is mostly audible unless I sit down with my kids for our reading time and get that like 30 minutes of hardcover to hardcover reading. But this one I just finished by Horowitz, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I mean, if every executive read that book, we'd just be in a lot better place business-wise. I mean, everybody.
It's a
It was
great one.
such a great book, and another one. The one before that I just finished. If anybody hasn't read, it's called Innovation Stack, and it's just about building these small little innovations like Vedex has done for system integration that gets you far enough ahead that even if somebody wanted to copy you, they would have to catch up to all your smaller innovations and not just leapfrog you, because when you have a single product, you can get leapfrogged if you're not early to market and be the first, right? But with
Right?
a large innovation stack that you've worked on and put customer service and customer care at the center of, solving a bunch of different little problems, it's a whole lot harder to catch up, if you will. And so that company has the chance to really expand.
That's an interesting one. I'll have to check that one out. I was not familiar with it, but it sounds intriguing. Well,
Yeah.
well, thanks for sharing that. And also, as we wrap up here, any last words of wisdom for our listeners?
Well, I would presume most of the listeners on this are really technology focused people, or explorers thinking about technology, or people like me when I was a kid and just loved what our future holds if we guide the technology. And I guess my final thought would be, let's remake education so that our kids have a better chance in the future and not keep trying to use industrial style training in the workplace and industrial style education for our learning.
Well, thank you for taking some busy time out of your busy schedule to join us today. Really appreciate it. And yeah, and hopefully our listeners will too.
And visit Techlandia when it's built.
That's right. Aaron's going to make it happen with the team at OMSI.
Love it. All right, Skip, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we can run this podcast out of the fourth floor someday.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jay.
Okay, bye, Skip.
That's a wrap on this episode of Techlandia, the podcast, where innovation meets insight. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to follow us, leave a review, and share it with your fellow tech explorers. You can follow us at techoregon.org for updates and more tech-fueled content. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep building the future.